Uncover the sinister secrets, the terrifying tale of the cursed Great Khan's forbidden feast. Sarah's heart raced as she stood at the window, staring into the street shrouded in shadows. Her neighborhood, once vibrant, now twisted into a ghostly apparition of what it used to be. The rusted remnants of cars lined the curb like forlorn sentinels, and the dilapidated houses whispered secrets of lives lived amid regret and dread. What had begun as an initiative to bring the community together, the upcoming potluck based on the fabled Great Khan's feast, now felt like a dark omen hovering over her family. Just yesterday, a neighbor had hurried past, eyes wide with fear, clutching a half-filled grocery bag as if it contained the secrets of the universe. Silence loomed thick in the air, a heavy blanket smothering familiar laughter. Now, it seemed every friendly nod had turned sour, morphing into furtive glances, each one heavy with unspoken words. Unsettled, she shook off the feeling, convincing herself it was just the economic strain gnawing at those around her. But the pressure in her chest didn't relent. That night, as the moon hung low and oppressive, she woke to the sound of hushed cries echoing from Mia's room. The little girl sat up, eyes glistening with tears and fear. "Mommy, the shadows, they're coming for us." Mia's words chilled Sarah to her bone, conjuring images of shadowy figures feasting grotesquely while chanting about a dark price. Wrapping her arms around her daughter, she struggled to banish the encroaching horror. Instead, soothing whispers escaped her lips, "It's just a bad dream, sweetheart." But as she comforted Mia, her own heart thudded in sync with her daughter's sobs. Before they could settle, an unexpected knock jolted the thick silence. Sarah peered through the peephole, breath hitching as she recognized the local official's grim face, one she'd just recently seen lurking near abandoned houses. His beady eyes bore into her, and his breath smelled of smoke and deceit. "You need to elevate the feast," he growled, a sinister undertone bleeding through his words. "Make it worth celebrating." Panic clawed at her throat. Fresh dread washed over her as he left, reminding her of the fleeting line between survival and submission. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days slipped by, each moment tightening the noose of anxiety. The potluck preparations felt less like a celebration and more like a noose, each dish hiding secrets, each contribution a symbol of buried betrayals. Her heart hammered with each passing hour as she began to realize the connections between her neighbors' struggles and the cursed potluck. There was something sinister lurking beneath the surface, compelling them with promises of prosperity while snake-like whispers of sacrifice clawed at her sanity. As night fell, suffocating her senses, the power flickered and died. Darkness enveloped her home, filling every corner with a suffocating weight. Outside, she heard the chant, the rhythmic calling of dark presences. Heart pounding, she grasped her children tightly, staring out into the night, knowing the true horror of the feast might only just be beginning. Would she uncover the buried sins of her neighbors, or would she fall foul to the ominous darkness encroaching upon their lives? The air was thick with dread. Sarah clutched Mia and Jason tightly to her chest, hoping her mere presence could shield them from whatever horrors awaited outside. The shadows seemed to stretch further, eager to swallow them whole. In the silence, the rhythmic chant pulsed through the walls like a heartbeat, deep, unwavering, relentlessly unsettling. It clawed at her sanity while seeping danger into their home. "Mommy, what are they saying?" Mia's voice trembled, cutting through the oppressive quiet. I don't know, sweetheart," Sarah lied, forcing a brave face. "Just stay close to me." Every instinct screamed for her to barricade the doors, to lock them in and ride out the storm. But she couldn't hide forever. The potluck was days away, and the town's sinister energy was growing more palpable by the minute. The official's words echoed in her mind, "Make it worth celebrating." What did he mean? What sacrifices were expected? The children's presence was her lifeline, yet with them beside her, her own terror expanded. She could feel the warmth of their bodies, a reminder of what she would protect at all costs. Still, the shadows pressed against the window, their black tendrils stroking the glass as if testing for entry. She could have sworn that when lightning illuminated the scene for a mere second, figures stood just beyond the reach of light, movement fluid and unnatural. Suddenly, there was another knock. Loud and insistent, it quaked through the already frail heart of Sarah's home. This was different, a series of knocks in rapid succession, almost frantic. She peered through the peephole again, noticing the figure draped in darkness. A chill spread through her as she recognized Mrs. Henderson, the once cheerful neighbor who now seemed consumed by worry. Sarah opened the door just a crack. "Mrs. Henderson, what, let me in?" The woman's voice was a breathless hiss. "They're out there. We have to talk." With a heart too heavy to refuse, Sarah swung the door open, allowing the woman to rush in. Mrs. Henderson's hair clung to her forehead, her hands shaking. "They know about us. They know our secrets, Sarah. We're not safe anymore." "What are you talking about?" Panic surged in Sarah's chest. The feast, every year it demands something darker. This time, it craves blood. Just then, a shadow passed the window, the chant rising in volume, a cacophony of eerie voices echoing off the walls of their very souls. Sarah's stomach lurched. What had once felt like mere superstition was morphing into a grotesque reality. "Why didn't anyone say anything?" Sarah whispered, still clutching her children. "Fear keeps us silent," Mrs. Henderson replied, eyes darting toward the window. "But now, they're hungry." And then the lights flickered back to life, bathing the room in a harsh glow. Relief washed over Sarah, but it was fleeting. She noticed strange symbols scratched into the wooden fixtures, faint yet chilling. It struck her this had been happening long before the feast was planned. "We have to warn others," Sarah said, desperation clawing at her throat. But before she could step forward, a scream pierced the night, slicing through the chant like a knife. It came from the street, raw and haunting, sending a reverberating chill through her bones. Her heart pounded. "What do we do?" And as if in response, a low, rumbling voice echoed from outside, resonating with wicked intent. "The feast will begin soon and offerings will be made." Sarah turned to see Mia's eyes wide with fright, Jason trembling beside her, and she knew as the shadows began to thicken once more around the windows that they were caught on a precipice, with nowhere to turn. They were being drawn into something vast, horrific. Would they be able to fight back against the encroaching evil? Or would they be swallowed along with the rest of their community into the darkness? The tension in the room was palpable, a living thing pressing against Sarah's chest. She cast a frantic glance at Mrs. Henderson, whose face had drained of color. "We can't just wait here," Sarah murmured, feeling a surge of adrenaline course through her veins. "We need to do something." "Like what?" Mrs. Henderson's voice shook, fraught with panic. "There's nothing we can do against them. They're not just outside, they're ingrained in our lives. Every smile, every gesture is part of it." The chanting outside twisted suddenly, a hunger rising that made Sarah's skin crawl. Mia clung to her tightly, and Jason's wide eyes darted to every corner of the room, as if expecting the shadows to leap forth. The thought of them being helpless made Sarah's throat tighten. "Mommy, please, can we go to Grandma's?" Mia's soft plea shattered the weighty silence. Sarah pressed her lips together. "We can't, honey. Not now." The truth twisted in her gut. Grandma would be in danger too. A whistling gust rattled the windows as if the wind itself sought to force its way inside. The shadows danced more violently now, grotesque forms warping in and out of the light. Outside, the scream from earlier echoed again, muffled yet shrill, crawling under Sarah's skin like icy fingers. "Listen." Mrs. Henderson's sudden urgency unnerved Sarah. "What if we get everyone together? We need to find a place to hide or to confront whatever this is. What if it's already too late? Sarah shot back, horror flickering in her eyes. What if they've already chosen their victims? She felt the weight of despair settle on her shoulders. A flash of lightning illuminated the room longer than before. Sarah squinted at the figures outside, strewn across front yards, limbs entangled like marionettes. An icy realization struck her. They weren't just neighbors, they were pawns in a greater plan, misled by fear and complacency. Maybe we can break the cycle, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. If we gather the townsfolk and reveal what we know. But even as she voiced her plan, doubt entered her heart. Would they even listen? Sarah. Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened. It's happening. Look. She pointed frantically to the window. Through the darkness, shadows began to move with intent. Red eyes glinted coldly in the night, coiling magic around the chanting as figures shifted, resembling the townsfolk now awakening to a sinister dance. Sarah turned to close the curtains, shielding the children from the nightmare outside. We have to stay quiet, she whispered fiercely. Another urgent scream came, a man's voice punctured by terror and desperation, and then silence, swallowed by the invigorated chant. Stay here. Sarah took a deep breath, her heart thudding in fear. I need to see what they're doing. Mrs. Henderson shook her head. You can't. You can't do this alone. The pleading in her voice echoed in Sarah's mind, but there was no time for argument. No time to hide. She had already lost too much. Gathering the last remnants of her courage, she slipped from the living room while tightening her grip on the knife she had tucked into her waistband. The dim hallway loomed before her, suspiciously silent, each creaking floorboard betraying her movements like a partner in a waltz. As she reached the front door, the chant intensified, now a primal growl that rattled even the dried leaves outside. Knowing she was running out of time, she peered through the peephole once more, praying for clarity. What lay beyond chilled her blood. It wasn't just shadow and silence. Figures bathed in an unnatural glow stood in a circle, heads bowed, the flickering light revealing unmistakable symbols carved into their skin, markings of sacrifice and servitude. No, Sarah gasped. Before her eyes, the ground trembled, the chant rising into a thunderous roar that could only mean one thing: it was time for the feast. And standing in the center was someone she recognized, Mrs. Henderson's face distorted in anguish, morphed into something unrecognizable. Sarah. You must join the ritual. The voice that came wasn't hers. It slithered through the door, slick and insidious. You have to offer your children. Terror gripped her. What had she gotten herself into? The only option left was to run, but where? The path ahead was shrouded in shadows, darkness woven tightly with treachery. Running would mean confronting the truth about the feast. And as Sarah took one step back into the room, she felt a shadow slip through the doorway, crawling toward her children. Catch the next chapter, where the true nature of the ritual robs the town of its sanity. Sarah's heart raced as she slammed the door shut, the wood thudding solidly against the frame. The sound echoed in the small room, as if even the walls were holding their breath. She spun to face Jason and Mia, their faces pale with fear. Stay away from the door. She hissed, her voice trembling. Panic surged through her veins. We need to hide somewhere safe. Mia's eyes were wide, glistening in the dim light. But Mommy, what's happening? Why is Grandma? Not now. Sarah snapped, cutting off the question as she ran to the kitchen. It felt imperative to make a plan, but her mind was a chaotic whirlwind. She hastily shoved utensils aside, looking for anything that might help them defend themselves. There's nothing here. Jason's voice creaked, strained with fear. What if they come in? The chant outside thickened, rising and falling like a storm, and in that moment, the thrill of terror morphed into a tangible entity. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, clawing at her resolve. With trembling hands, she grabbed a metal pot and a butcher knife, holding them together. A low rumble vibrated through the house, rattling the dishes, deep and ominous. "They're coming closer," Sarah whispered, drawing her children near. She could feel their small bodies shaking, their breaths quickening like tiny drums at a funeral, each pulse reminding her of what was at stake. "Mia, stay close to me," she ordered, holding the knife tighter. "What do we do?" Jason's voice cracked. "We find a way to escape and exit." Panic throbbed along her pulse. "Maybe we can crawl through the basement?" Her thoughts raced, but another blood-chilling scream echoed from outside, one that was followed by the sickening sound of laughter. It was low and sinister, a cacophony that sent icy spikes down her spine. "We'll be fine, we'll be fine." The words fell from her lips, desperate reassurances. They meant nothing, a futile attempt to shore up her shattered courage. With every heartbeat, the air felt thicker, more suffocating. Sarah felt the pull of the darkness outside. If she didn't fight back, they would inevitably be claimed. Suddenly, the front door rattled violently, a heavy thud jolting the foundation. "They're here. Mommy." Mia clung tighter, nails pressing into Sarah's arm. Gathering her wits, Sarah stepped closer to the door, though dread coiled in the pit of her stomach. "No matter what happens, you stay behind me." She moved to the side of the door, the knife gripped in her hand. Each steady thud sent waves of fear crashing over her, mingling with adrenaline. She locked eyes with Jason. "If they get in, you flee. Get outside, run." Before he could respond, her thoughts were interrupted by a soft, twisted whisper sliding through the cracks. "Let us in, dear Sarah. Your children are hungry." The voice was familiar, yet the inflection felt wrong, hollow. Her gut twisted tighter. "No!" Sarah shouted, dread seeping into her bones. "Get away from my children." The laughter pulsed again, a dark, mocking chorus. It felt close, the shadows at the edge of their vision grew thicker, more insistent. The symbols, those horrific carvings, echoed in her mind. In desperation, Sarah turned. "The back window. We need to move." With a fierce determination, she pulled on her children, rushing toward the kitchen, but the door shook again, more violently, as if something massive was trying to break through. "Get ready to run." She gasped, adrenaline fueling her movement. She reached the window, fumbling to unlatch it, heart hammering against her ribcage like a prisoner trying to escape. Just as she flung it open, the door splintered, wood screaming against the relentless force of the darkness. Fear twisted and screamed in her throat. "Go!" But as they scrambled to clamber out, they froze. Standing in the doorway, illuminated by the dying light, was John, his skin marred by new, horrific markings. He grinned, eyes glowing with an inexplicable hunger that made bile rise in Sarah's throat. "Come join the feast," he beckoned softly, a haunting whisper that promised something unnaturally wrong. The air thrummed with dread, wrapping around Sarah like a choking vine. Were they truly safe anywhere? "Run!" she screamed, forcing herself and her children into the night. Only to find waiting figures, faces familiar yet grotesquely transformed, standing like sentinels, ready to claim what was theirs. What was real? Each question spiraled through her mind as they stumbled into a night that promised not just horror but a revelation so grotesque it could shatter their sanity. Would they escape the grasp of the feast, or would they become another offering to the shadows? Find out in the next chapter, where the connection between the townsfolk and the darkness is revealed in a way no one ever anticipated. They dashed into the thick shadows of the night, heartbeats echoing against a backdrop of unsettling silence. The street stretched out before them, once familiar, now distorted under a veil of horror. "Where do we go?" Jason's voice broke, panic seeping into every syllable. The grip of darkness wrapped around them, and they could feel something, or someone, watching from the edges. "Just keep running," Sarah urged, adrenaline surging through her. She could hear the whispers of the shadows swirling about. The shadows had eyes. We need to find a place to hide somewhere safe. Mia stumbled and fell, her little knees hitting the pavement hard. Mommy! She cried out, tears spilling down her cheeks. Get up, baby. Please. Sarah's voice cracked as she reached to help Mia up. She glanced back just in time to see shadows shifting, coiling toward them, eager and hungry. They hissed through the gaps of broken fences, through weeds glistening with early dew, every rustle sounding like a threat. Afraid to look over her shoulder again, Sarah kept her focus ahead, but the nightmare wasn't just behind them. It was everywhere, a pall of dread that seeped into the very air around. They rounded a corner and froze in front of an old house, its windows dark like vacant eyes. We can go in there, Sarah suggested, desperation fueling her words. We'll hide until it's safe. Mommy, I don't want to, Mia whimpered. Please, Mia. We have no choice. Sarah pulled her children close, their breaths mingling in the chill of the night, a shared fear uniting them against the horrors lurking outside. Inside, the air was stale, cloying with decay. The beams of the structure creaked, mourning their presence. It feels bad in here, Jason whispered, eyes darting around. He was right. A thick silence grew heavy, like mist. Even the shadows here felt more alive. Let us stay quiet, Sarah instructed, moving deeper into the murky dark. She fumbled her way through the kitchen, scanning for a weapon or anything she could use. The utensils lay abandoned in grease, remnants of a life long forsaken. The chills crawling up her arms urged her to step back, to flee, but she had to protect her children. A shiver ran through the house when they heard it scratching. Something was clawing at the walls, from the darkness beyond. It echoed, surrounding them, growing louder, more insistent. What is that? Mia pressed against Sarah's leg, her small body trembling like a leaf. "Shh," Sarah whispered, her voice a fragile thread. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the corner of the room, slinking like smoke, pale and gaunt, features an unrecognizable blend of familiar and grotesque. Sarah's heart dropped when she saw its eyes glittering with the same hunger she had seen in John's, ravenous and staring straight at them. "Welcome home," it rasped, a voice layered with echoes of those they once knew, now twisted and malicious. "No. Stay back." Sarah stepped forward, a butcher knife raised. She didn't care if she was terrified. If it meant protecting her children, she would strike. The figure laughed, an unsettling sound that reverberated through the creaky floor. "Join us, we've missed you." It took a step closer, revealing more, not a body but a mass of shadows clinging to memories. Jason whimpered, the terror in his voice sparking a primal urge to protect. "Mommy," the shadows started to swirl, growing thicker, darker, forming a vortex that trapped them inside the house, wrapping around them as if they were a part of the very fabric of darkness. "Run!" Sarah shouted, pushing her children toward the back door. They stumbled, but the darkness surged, eager to drag them back. She felt herself being pulled, her own body fighting against the compulsion to succumb to it. Outside, the chanting rose again from the figures waiting in the distance, eerie and enticing. "What is happening?" Mia cried, but all Sarah could respond with was fear. With a surge of energy fueled by desperation, Sarah lunged back toward the front door, battling the pull, dragging her children with her. Her heart raced as the house groaned around them, but then she saw it, in the shadows, an insight, a grotesque revelation that twisted her stomach. The townsfolk weren't just waiting for them. They were trapped too, bound beneath the weight of a dark secret, feeding the very darkness hunting them. "Mommy, please." Jason's scream pierced through the chaos. "Stay close. Keep running." Sarah cried out again, her spirit unwavering, pushing back against the dread. What if it was all a trap? The figures were closing in, hunger radiating from them. The night was thick and alive with their twisted intentions. As Sarah tore through the darkness, a burning question flooded her mind: who would sacrifice everything to survive this nightmare? What price would they have to pay to escape the clutches of that cursed legacy? What dark truth awaited them that night? They burst through the door, the wooden frame splintering under the force of their frantic escape. Outside, the air hung heavy, thick with a pungent smell like rotting leaves and charred wood. Sarah glanced back only briefly, afraid the haunting laughter would echo in her mind long after they were gone. "Run. Just keep running," she urged again, the terror vibrating in her voice. Jason and Mia followed, legs pounding against the hard ground, breaths coming in desperate gasps. The old house creaked behind them, and for a moment, Sarah believed the shadows were reaching, stretching towards them like tendrils ready to snatch them back. It felt as if the entire structure was alive, mourning their flight. The chanting escalated, an insistent wave rising from the throng that had gathered, growing ever closer, taunting them. "Don't look back," she shouted, gripping Jason's hand tightly, tugging Mia along. Yet, despite her warning, her heart sank as she heard a new sound weaving into the fabric of the night, a low, drawn-out wail that seemed to ripple through the darkness. It was a song, and it called to her with a lure she could hardly resist. "Mommy, what's that?" Mia gasped, glancing up, tears glimmering in her eyes. Sarah pushed forward, the weight of panic suffocating her. "Just keep going. Don't stop." But the shadows were on them, no longer mere wisps at the edges, but a tangible force pulling at their heels. She could feel the chilling mist tugging at her clothing, whispering promises of safety if she would just turn around. Suddenly, Jason stumbled, his foot catching on an uneven patch of grass. He fell hard, skin scraping against gritty earth. "Jason!" Sarah gasped, spinning around. In that instant, she felt a million eyes upon her, a pit of ravenous beings swarming around the edges of her vision. They weren't just shadows anymore. They had form, faces twisted in grief and hunger, desperate to break from the confines of their own eternal prison. "Get up! Get up!" Sarah urged, panic coursing through her veins as she hurried to help her son. Every second felt like a lifetime. The shadows were edging closer, reaching out with hands that could not truly touch, just an insatiable lust for flesh and warmth. "Mommy, I can't," Jason whimpered, but Sarah could feel the urgency surging in her. "Please, you have to." With a fierce determination born of maternal instinct, she lifted him, panic and adrenaline guiding her as she pulled both her children to their feet. But a scratching sound erupted from just behind them, sharper, more frantic. A figure darted out from the dark, its hollow eyes gleaming. "Join us," it hissed, a voice that twisted like a knife in her gut. "You're just like us now." Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. "No." She tore herself away from the fear that sought to anchor her down, pushing her children ahead into the murky night. They dashed past the gathering of figures looming in the distance, their outlines just enough to reveal the sorrowful faces of people she'd once known, friends and neighbors now ensnared in a horrific dance. Their mouths moved in unison, speaking of things best left unspoken, urging Sarah to stop. "Mommy!" Mia cried, clinging tightly to her hand, the fear palpable as they slipped deeper into darkness. "Trust me, we need to find shelter." As they sprinted forward, a flicker of movement caught Sarah's eye, a crumbling pathway that led toward the woods, a place partially hidden by the looming trees. She pulled Jason and Mia in that direction, where the shadows seemed to thin, but the sounds of the beckoning figures grew louder in a sinister symphony. "Will they follow us?" Jason's voice quaked, a question that cut Sarah more deeply than any blade. "I don't know," she gasped, the truth heavy on her. In that moment, they reached the edge of the woods, where the trees stood like tall sentinels, their gnarled branches twisting above as if protecting them from what lay beyond. But dread coiled in her stomach. "What are we going to do?" She steadied her breaths, trying to quell the rising panic. There was no turning back. She could feel the weight of her children's fear, hear their small hearts pounding against her side. And then, a rustle in the undergrowth made her freeze. A dark figure moved just beyond the tree-line. It was bigger than before, crawling like a beast that melded with the very shadows. It paused, its gaze piercing through the dense leaves, locking onto them with a ravenous hunger. The woods felt alive, whispering secrets of something darker hidden within. "Sarah!" Jason shouted, pulling her back just as the shadows began to writhe and twist, transforming into a tide that threatened to swallow them whole. "What now?" she whispered, heart racing, uncertainty clawing at her thoughts. They were trapped between the horrors of the house and this nightmare, but then, through the chaos, a glimmer of light shimmered in the distance, a flicker that might be refuge or ruin. "Over there!" she cried, pointing toward the light, and despite the urgency of their situation, the truth loomed like an impending storm. Could it lead them to salvation, or would it plunge them deeper into darkness? As they charged through the trees, they all understood that whatever awaited them beyond those shadows could change everything, and perhaps reveal who they truly were meant to become in their desperate bid for survival. They stumbled through thick underbrush, branches clawing at their faces like skeletal fingers. The darkness enveloped them, but that glimmer of light danced just ahead, flickering like a will-o'-the-wisp, promising safety yet danger in equal measure. "Faster!" Sarah urged, feeling the weight of the shadows behind them like a tangible force. The haunting song echoed, rising in volume as it reached their ears, mingling with the whispers of their friends turned enemies. The air felt electric, thrumming with unseen energy. Mia's small hand felt like ice in Sarah's grip. "Mommy, what if it's a trap? That's why we need to find out." Each step felt heavier, as if the ground was pulling them down, trying to keep them as part of the cursed land. Sarah pushed the thought aside, no time for doubts now. They were running from monsters, but in the back of her mind, a terrible realization lurked: the monsters might not be far behind. Suddenly, Jason stuttered to a halt, his wide eyes locked onto the light. "Mom!" he cried, his voice raw with panic. "Jason!" Sarah turned, ready to yank him forward, but her own gaze was drawn to the light dancing between the trees. All at once, it was like their fears had taken shape. The shadows coalesced around them, figures were emerging, their faces twisted in agony, mouths stretching in unnatural smiles. "What do we do?" Jason's voice trembled, filled with dread. Before she could respond, the light flickered once more, illuminating a clearing. It was small, overgrown with weeds that seemed to thrive in neglect, yet centered within it stood a long, ancient table decorated with lavish feasts piled high, glittering fruits, roasted meats, and wines that sparkled like the lights in a carnival. But there was something profoundly unsettling about it. The food was rancid, coated in a ghostly sheen. It exuded a stench that clawed at Sarah's gut, turning her stomach. "They want us to join them," Mia whispered, her voice hauntingly curious. "Look at all that food, it's so pretty. Don't you dare." Sarah grabbed her daughter's arm, feeling the urge to bolt again. The figures from the shadow now lurked at the edge of the clearing, their laughter mingling with the faint whispers of the dismal song. They were close enough now to see that their mouths spoke in rhythm, reciting a dreadful incantation that echoed in Sarah's mind, twisting her emotions and filling her heart with despair. "Mommy!" Jason's eyes were filled with wonder and fear. "What if we're hungry?" The word struck her like a bolt of lightning. A shift in the air, a whisper that held icy tendrils of temptation. "This isn't the way," she insisted, shaking her head violently. "We can't eat what's offered by the shadows." But as she spoke, her resolve faltered. Shadows twisted more aggressively now, reaching out as if to coax them closer to the table, to the banquet that promised respite from the nightmare that chased them. "Join us," the figures hissed, their voices a cacophony of familiar tones from those she once loved. It was disorienting, hearing laughter that once brought her joy now twisted into a grotesque mockery. "Join us in eternal feasting." "No. We want tea." But even her own voice trembled against the tide of their dark invitation. She could feel Mia's small body tense and Jason grip tighter onto her arm, clearly torn between fear and the allure of the banquet. But then the trees began to twist, their limbs acting as the shadows' instruments, creating a web that choked any possible escape. Sarah spotted the paths of darkness curling at her feet, eager to ensnare her weary family. "What do you really want?" she yelled, altogether impervious to their beckoning. Panic clawed at her throat, words tumbling out. Is this how you try to keep us here? With lies? What am I running from? In an instant, the dark figures froze, their mouths still moving, yet the sounds that came out felt like an incantation, the atmosphere thickening around her. The very air seemed alive with dread, and it wrapped around them like a noose, tightening with each beat of her heart. Just then, the flickering light vanished, plunging them back into darkness. Panic surged anew, and then, an ear-piercing shriek erupted from the shadows, reverberating through the trees, fracturing the stillness like shattered glass. Run! Sarah shouted once more, dragging her children into the unknown, their small legs pounding against the ground, but she knew this time, it felt different. The figures behind them surged forward, like a roiling wave, their haunting cries filling the night. Sarah's heart raced, each pulse warning her that they were no longer just fleeing. Now the shadows were desperate and they were closing in fast. How could they escape this? And what lay beyond the darkness if they were caught? An urgency so great surged through Sarah, pushing her to the front as she realized all too late that the true terror was still lurking just beneath the surface. As they neared a clearing, the flickering light reappeared, brighter and warmer than before. This time, it glimmered with an essence of hope, but was it a sanctuary or a trap? Come on! She cried. Follow the light. But as they raced toward it, a bone-chilling silence fell. The shadows stilled, a suffocating anticipation hanging in the air. What waited beyond? Could it lead them to salvation? Or would it drag them into an even darker abyss? It felt as if the woods were holding its breath, the moment teetering on the brink as Sarah and her children charged toward the uncertain glow. The flickering light surged, illuminating the clearing in a warm glow that felt deceitful against the icy grip of fear tightening around them. Sarah propelled herself forward, pulling her children along as if the light were a lifeline. Each step resonated against the ground, but there was an unsettling echo. Was it just their hurried breaths, or something more sinister thrumming beneath the surface? As they burst into the clearing, the light enveloped them. For a fleeting moment, Sarah found herself basking in its warmth as she turned to check on Jason and Mia. Jason's face was pale, gaping at the spectacle before them, while Mia, in stark contrast, seemed momentarily entranced, her small hands brushing against the ethereal glow. "Mom, it's beautiful," she gasped, her eyes wide with awe. "Stay close," Sarah barked, an urgency crawling under her skin. The table was still there, an unholy monument draped in shadows from where they had just fled. It loomed between the trees like a predator lying in wait, every shadow splintering from it with purpose. "Join us," the voices echoed again, swirling around like a dark mist. They seemed to come from the very light that felt inviting. "You can be part of this feast forever." "No," Sarah shouted into the darkness, shaking her head so hard it felt as if her resolve might rattle loose. "It's a lie." Yet the shimmering light beckoned, pulsating like a heartbeat, each thump sending out waves of temptation that made her skin tingle. It was a vicious pull, something deep in her mind whispering that perhaps just a taste wouldn't hurt. But the stench of rotting flesh hinted at the truth. They were luring them into a trap. Suddenly, Mia began to wander toward the table, eyes glazed. "Mommy, I'm so hungry," she murmured, stepping off the path and nearing the grotesque feast laid before them. "Mia, no." Sarah lunged, grabbing her hand just as she crossed into the Shadow's realm. Panic shot through her, heart racing like it might burst free from her chest. Jason's voice was a mere whisper. The shadows had already begun to creep closer, fingers of darkness curling around the light. "Let us eat, join us," the song rose, sending shivers crashing over them like icy waves. The figures watched from the periphery, their eager expressions darkening, the unnatural smiles stretching wider. With a desperate yank, Sarah pulled Mia close, her other hand gripping Jason tightly. The children trembled against the invisible hand stretching toward them. "We have to move." Just as she turned, a deafening crash erupted behind them, branches snapping like dry bones. The dark figures entered the clearing, their forms melded with the very shadows they came from, eyes burning with a sadistic hunger. "Run!" Sarah shouted, filling her voice with courage, even as dread pulsed at the corners of her mind. They dashed back into the woods, the light dimming with every step. But the shadows were relentless, racing behind, their laughter a chilling reminder that the monsters were no longer just in the dark, they were part of it. Suddenly, the path forked in a way not seen before. One way led toward the light they had just escaped, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. The other path twisted deeper into the woods, where an unnatural silence lay like a heavy blanket. "Mom! Which way?" Jason cried out, panic lacing his voice. Fear twisted inside her, both paths felt like a death sentence. Sarah could feel the shadows clawing at her ankles, could hear the soft, sinister whispers seducing her with promises of safety. "I don't know. Just run," she shouted, urgency pushing her forward. Mia's breath came out in choked gasps, and for a moment, Sarah thought she heard her daughter murmur, "But what if they just want to help us?" The sweetness of her words chilled Sarah deeper than the night air. Before she could answer, the forest erupted in sound, branches cracking under unseen weight, and the laughter transformed into a blood-curdling scream that made her freeze in place. What was pursuing them? What waited in the darkness beyond? As the shadows thickened, her heart raced. Uncertainty clawed at her resolve. Which path held the true danger? Would they find the exit they so desperately sought, or was it all a trap, the woods conspiring against them? Their breaths mingled in the frigid air, the tension curling around them like the very roots of the underbrush, and in that moment of desperation, Sarah realized the woods were alive, each decision a step deeper into unknown terror. Which path would they take? And would they survive long enough to find the answer? The atmosphere crackled like static, crawling under her skin as Sarah stood at the fork, her head spinning with terror. Time seemed to stretch, but the shadows were closing in. It felt as though they were whispering secrets directly into her soul, drawing her in with their cruel persuasion. She tightened her grip on Mia and Jason, forcing herself to breathe, to think. "Stay close," she commanded, her voice a harsh whisper. They had to decide, but each choice felt like a descent into madness. The murmurs from the woods pulled at her mind, echoing her own doubts. What if one path led to safety? What if the other was their doom? "Mia," Jason said, desperation glimmering in his eyes, "let us just go. Please." "Mia, we can't listen to them." Sarah shot back, harder than she intended. "We have to trust each other." Mia glanced between her brother and mother, conflicted, her small face a mask of confusion. Shadows shifted, flickering just out of clear view. Suddenly, a grotesque figure emerged, creeping from the suffocating darkness. The moonlight cast jagged shadows across its skin, which reflected an unsettling luminescence. Eyes hollow, it reached toward them. "Join us," the figure crooned, the voice was sickly sweet, threading through the air like a noxious fog. It beckoned, wanting to merge the children into its cursed feast. "Back!" Sarah screamed, entangling her fingers in her children's hair, pulling them away just as it lunged. Jason cried out, his body instinctively jerking back from the figure's touch, but it was everywhere, whispering promises of warmth and comfort. The shadows converged, a haunting chorus crescendoing behind them, eager to consume. "Choose." The path ahead twisted and turned into the dense brush, where the light faded, and the darkness thickened. Each option shimmered with a promise it was a sick game. The fear squeeze tightened around Sarah's heart as she felt the shrill grip of terror. "Mom, I can't. Jason was trembling, an urgency rendering him almost paralyzed. "Trust me." Sarah gritted through clenched teeth, adrenaline surging through her body. The children looked up, fear flickering in their innocent eyes, and it shattered her heart. With no more time to waste, she chose the left path, the one toward the darkness. The laughter behind them morphed into frantic whispering, and just as they charged forward, branches scraped against Sarah's skin like manic fingers, pulling relentlessly, as though the forest itself wanted to reclaim them. "Run! Faster!" Sarah urged, her voice cracking under the weight of her growing fear. But the shadows were coming creeping and crawling, their faces stretching into grotesque smiles that clawed at the edges of her sanity. Then, a sudden roar pulsed through the woods. It was guttural, violent, hinting at something far worse than mere darkness. She sensed it was not merely the woods alive, a deeper, more wicked force had awoken. Something hunted them. A sharp noise cracked through the night, a branch splintering, a heavy footfall echoing in the distance. She risked a glance behind. A colossal figure loomed within the shadows, its form monstrous and misshapen, glistening with the sick sheen of grotesque hunger. "Emoam!" Jason screamed, his voice cracking with raw fear. "Keep moving!" she shouted, and just ahead, she saw a clearing. Light flickered like the pulse of a dying star, dangerous yet tantalizing. Would it lead them to safety or doom? With every ounce of strength, Sarah pushed them forward, the breath of the unseen creature hot on their heels, its cries rising in intensity. "Stop!" A voice rang out from the shadows. A new voice, low and commanding, cutting through the chaos. Shivers raced down her spine. What was waiting for them at the end of this path? And could she truly protect her children from the fate that lurked in the depths of the woods? Just as Sarah's foot hit the edge of the light, the ground began to tremble, an ancient presence shifting below. What waits beyond the light? Is it salvation or something much worse? As Sarah and her children burst into the light, the cacophony of shadows fell silent. For a moment, the warmth cocooned them, overshadowing the dread that pursued them. Standing just beyond the threshold, an otherworldly glow bathed the clearing in a soft luminescence. It was a stark contrast to the darkness that hungered behind them. Vibrant colors flickered around them, lush greens from the trees, the shimmering gold of the grass, and delicate flowers that seemed to sway gently, almost beckoning. But even in this seemingly tranquil haven, Sarah's heart thumped loudly against her ribcage, a warning against the illusion of safety. "What is this place?" Jason whispered, eyes wide with wonder. "It feels nice," Mia murmured, momentarily forgetting their terror, though Sarah could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "Stay close," Sarah commanded, instinctively edging them backward, wanting the protection of the trees. Hitching in her breath, she felt the shadows slinking back, a writhing mass held at bay by the light, but she knew it wouldn't last. "Mommy, it's beautiful, and it smells good. Can we eat?" Mia asked eagerly, pointing toward luscious berries clinging to low branches. "No," Sarah snapped, fierceness cutting through fear. "You don't know what it could be." She could feel the pull of the darkness behind them, an insistent whisper that turned her stomach. But the shadows were not far behind. A low, guttural growl broke through the silence, the very air vibrating with the monstrous intensity of it. From the edge of darkness, twisted forms began to emerge, figures flickering like live wires, eyes glinting with insatiable hunger. Their mouths curled in eerie mockery, chanting the same phrases as before, a sinister invitation for Sarah and her children to join the wretched feast. As the shadows drew closer, promising warmth and belonging, Sarah felt herself wavering. It was tempting earlier, just a taste, just a moment suspended within their reach. But amidst the swell of horror, a flicker of clarity sparked in her mind. "No." Her voice strengthened, pushing back against the mounting dread. "We want to be part of this feast." She planted her feet firmly, taking a deep breath to steel herself. "They're nothing like us," she shouted, her voice echoing in defiance of the swirling darkness. It sent shockwaves through her body, echoing the truth of the moments she had fought to keep her children safe. The figures halted, the chant wavering as they became agitated. Shifting among themselves, they hesitated for a heartbeat. Sarah took that moment to grip Jason's and Mia's hands tightly, her voice resolute. "We need to find a way out of here. Together." With her heart pounding fiercely, Sarah propelled them forward between the gleaming strings of light that weaved a delicate web, fiercely opposing the shadows just beyond their glow. As they pushed deeper into the heart of the light, grappling at hope and determination, something extraordinary happened. The darkness began to fade, the figures that once pursued them faltered, their forms deflating like balloons punctured by anger and despair. "Mom, look!" Jason gasped, standing tall beside her as gleaming symbols began to swirl around them, a protective barrier shimmering just beyond reach of the shadows. The markings of a covenant came into view, a shield against the deception. Was it a promise? A reminder that darkness could be repelled? That whatever malevolent force sought to devour them could be thwarted? With sheer force of will, they pushed forward. The clearing blossomed with color, wildflowers bursting into life, not only a sanctuary, but a stark reminder that even within the darkest moments, beauty could persist. For every figure that flickered in the shadows, there were 10 more that disappeared in their wake, a crawl back into the oblivion from whence they came. In that suspended second, as flickers of hope ignited within their hearts, Sarah felt strength surging through her like wildfire. "Stand strong. We can make it," she urged. And then, with the jubilant call of dawn, they breached the boundary of the clearing. The light coalesced into a guiding beacon, illuminating their path as the last shadow dissolved, leaving behind only echoes. For they stepped back into their world, one where daylight flooded the streets, vibrant with life and joy. Sarah gazed at her children, their laughter echoing like music, a melody of survival. "We made it!" Mia cheered, and Sarah found herself folding into Jason's embrace, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks. "Mommy, are we safe now?" he asked, voice trembling. She swallowed hard, a tight lump in her throat. "Yes, baby. We are safe." But beyond them, the town buzzed back to normalcy, a hum that felt both eerily familiar and frightfully hollow, yet she knew that shadows lurked just out of sight, always waiting. The depth of that terror would remain etched in their memories, a collective resolve forming between them, reminding them that even when darkness beckoned, they would confront it together. As they walked hand in hand through the streets, a sense of connection surged. Beneath that facade of normalcy, the memories of the curse lingered like a storm cloud, lessons learned amidst the horror, the price they might yet pay for peace. Sarah uttered a silent prayer of gratitude. They had escaped, but the fight was far from over. What were the townsfolk harboring beneath their facades? What sacrifices did they continue to make to keep the darkness at bay? And with that whisper, she knew this wasn't the end, just a new beginning, a fierce reminder to face the unknown, seeking light even amid shadows that would always attempt to feast on hope. "Stay vigilant," she thought as they walked towards the rising sun, a promise that together, they would find a way. And so, this tale comes to its close, but the echoes of darkness remain. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm, it really makes a difference. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. I want to hear from you. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Thanks for being with me on this journey.